boundaries. Boundaries are important and always have been. This is a dead hedge. It's a boundary between cants, between areas of coppice, and it is temporary. It will last about 5 years before it rots away to almost nothing. In the meantime, it concentrates the dead wood in an area, and then it builds up nice and tall, and if the brambles get in, which they certainly would along this edge here, see all the brambles? This is the edge of the field. We'll end up with a really dense, long feature which little perching birds can sneak into and then womble along inside the hedge, so they're hidden and their movements are hidden from corvids and other predators. So their nests can be hidden away. This here isn't much good at the moment, except perhaps for wrens, which tend to nest near the ground. Other species tend to go a little bit higher, but there's no bramble in here, not yet. But further over, we could go and look at another hedge from the year before, which is full of bramble, and it's really tall, really dense, and really good nesting habitat. Because the body of the cant, like the body of the cant now, is pretty much bobbins as nesting habitat. This will also be foraging habitat in here. And there'll be foraging habitat as the coppice starts to grow up, and it'll grow up really, really fast, so long as we can keep the deer out. So dead hedges are a temporary boundary. The live hedge can last a lot longer, and here are a few lasting echoes of a live hedge. These two trees are hawthorns. I'm going to have these because they're beautiful firewood, and I haven't got the room to knock them over and lay them, which I could do, but my cant is ending there. So these will be coppiced. They'll be covered by a dead hedge, which will start there and run along this way. You can see where I've cut some side branches off. All this morass here will just be dropped along the line of the dead hedge, so as little effort as possible. This is mostly dead, there's lots of bits of ash and stuff in there, and I'm going to have to be fairly careful. And some of these bits of this hazel will also be dropped on the dead hedge. And beyond it, there's another hawthorn, I think, which will be laid onto here, and there's also a few elms. And that's an elm sucker there. That is right in the line of this boundary here, which is a barbed wire fence. This is a good few years old. Barbed wire didn't come in till 1860s, 1870s, invented in America. And before that, there's a remnant of another older fence here. And this is wrought iron, drilled, and then line wires. So the wires are lines with no barbs in between. And that's a much older fence. That's probably from the turn of the 19th, 20th century, maybe a little bit before. So you've got two fences here. This older one, this newer one, slightly inside the field edge. Now I think the farmer's going to want to renew this fence fairly soon. This fence was on top of a little bank. There's not much of it left. It's fairly low and not very obvious. This fence was done on the field edge outside the bank. If I knock all this lot over and leave his fence clear, that makes his job easier. Hopefully it'll make him even more happy to have me cutting in here, because I don't pay any money. I'm here kind of on sufferance. He gets the coppice recut and I get this firewood. The hazel isn't very popular because it's awkward to do and it's difficult to make money off it for firewood, if that's your major business. So hopefully if I can make his job easier, he'll think even better of me than he does at the moment. If he does, presumably he does. Hopefully he does. Because I want this gig until I'm too old to be capable of doing it anymore. I'll make no bones about that. Well, over here is another boundary. This is a wrought iron fence. Some might call this a parkland fence. And you can see how it's constructed. Got uprights with square holes in, and then the horizontals You can see where they're bent, and then these staples are put in and bent over to secure it. No welding in it, just purely mechanical joints, and it was then tarred. You can see where it's rotted out at ground level. This is kind of a generation older than that upright and line wire fence. And this would have been expensive. This shows you how important when this fence was put in. Maybe Victorian, I don't actually know. Hopefully there's some people out there who are interested in this sort of stuff and will be able to tell me. But it's quite old, quite expensive. It runs all the way down here and all the way up there. And it goes right the way through this old elm. It's difficult to know whether the elm's holding the fence up or the fence is holding the elm stump up. And you can see where it's grown through. So that's another boundary. And you can see how it was secured. And this basically tells you that this woodland was important to the farm to spend the money to keep the cattle out of it. Because this, I think, has always been a cattle farm, maybe with some sheep. And there's been arable here as well. So this boundary was important. And there's also these huge stalls along the edge of the woodland here. Again on a little bank, not very big. But this boundary has been here for quite some considerable time. So boundaries, if you're walking through a wood, are well worth looking at and making the effort to find them and even record them. What shape are they? Is there a ditch on one side? Is there a ditch on both sides? Because if you've got a change in ownership, quite often the ownership goes up to the far side of the ditch. The bank would have been basically to keep the riffraff out, keep other people's stock out of your ground, but the ownership boundary would have been the far edge of a ditch. There's no ditch here because this is a management boundary within a holding, not an ownership boundary. Right, these trees here are sycamore. And you can see the way they are. They're elongated along the inside of the boundary. We might knock these over this year, depending on how time goes. Then taking away any usable material for firewood. But the squirrels absolutely rude worded this. This is all squirrel damage. They stripped the bark, rot's got in, so there'll be relatively little decent firewood in this. But I don't think we'll be able to keep squirrels out or be able to cull them enough to keep this safe. But at least it will stop them going after the hazel. They seem to much prefer sycamore. Right, waiting for the big noisy machine. This is Ashtead Common. And here we have some pollards. So pasture woodland. And over here is a boundary. And it's a biggie. This is a wood bank. Because we have the common land here. And this was enclosed or impaled coppice. E-N-P-A-L-E-D. E-M-P-A-L-E-D. No, I-N-P-I-L. Anyway, it's impaled, not impaled as in staked, through the heart. We've got a big ditch, and that was used to build this big bank. And once upon a time, would either have had a hawthorn hedge on it, or a fence made of pales. A little bit reminiscent of what we have here. On the other side, this was ancient woodland. But this was all felled either in the 70s or the early 1980s by a previous landowner whose intention was basically to graze. But you can see the boundary, huge bank. So this was important. And the big ditch. And here comes the big noisy machine. So I need to go and do some work.